a lot of good people with good intentions and maybe even good personal principles don't end up exhibiting those characteristics in the workplace. Why is that?
Because it's very difficult to do, and it costs. There's a price tag associated with it. And you can tell whether somebody's principles that they espouse are really principles that they hold dear if they are willing to pay for them, if they're willing to do the hard things. I mean, it's sort of like it's what you do when nobody's looking that really displays what your character is. And it's what you do when it really costs you something that determines whether or not you really, in fact, hold people in high regard. Even, for example, if you do have to lay people off. And there are certainly lots of circumstances in which that's the best way to do business. But how do you treat them in the process? How do you deal with them beforehand? How do you deal with them during the process? What kind of help and assistance do you provide to them? And how do you hold them in your own mind as you go through that?
Probably the single thing we do the most of is say no to entrepreneurs. How much time do each of you think about what it feels like as an entrepreneur to be sending a business plan or approaching your firm and how they're treated? How much time do you spend on that versus where do I get the next opportunity to invest? There's a serious cost associated with thinking about it and making the decisions to make that a better experience for somebody.
Yeah, I'll give you an example. Let's say that you're in the office of the CEO of one of your portfolio companies. And you're there, and the CEO gets interrupted, and the head of engineering and facilities comes in and says, "Chief, I need to talk to you for a second. We've been negotiating for this new space as part of our growth process, and we are growing rapidly, and after a period of great difficulty, we seem to have broken through, and we got to add significant space, and so I've been negotiating this space. And what we agreed on when we did the negotiation actually didn't come back in the contracts. Their attorneys drew up the contracts, and what I've discovered is they made a mistake in developing the contracts, and the mistake is one that's to our advantage and will save us $1 million a year. What do you want me to do?" How would you answer that? When $1 million a year is going to equate to maybe 2, 3, 4% of revenue, talk about impact on margin. How do you answer that? Here's what Mr. Kaufman's answer was, because that very question occurred. He said, "Mr. Juergens," who was the guy who brought him the question, he says, "What do you think is the right thing to do? If you were Mr. Crow on the other end of the deal, what would you want me to do?" Let me ask you again, what's the right thing to do? The right thing is to go back to Mr. Crow and his attorneys and say, you've made a mistake. And we shouldn't go forward with this. This was not your intention. It's not what we agreed on. And we should rewrite the contracts. Are you sure? Yeah, I'm sure. Because that's the right thing to do, and that's the way I'd want to be treated. Until you make those kind of decisions, those kind of statements are just writing on a wall. Clearly just writing on a wall. Here's another example. We've been buying papaver hydrochloride from Eli Lilly now for about 10 years. And we've now found a supplier in Germany that will sell it to us for considerably less. And I want to switch to the German supplier because we make more money on that. Have you talked to the folks at Lilly? Well, we've told them we'd like them to reduce their price. Okay. But did you remember the following things? 5 years ago, when we couldn't pay the bill, Lilly stuck with us and gave us extended terms. Didn't know that, Mr. Kaufman. He said, well, I know it. And that meant something to me. And if we're going to change, the only way we're going to change is if we go to them and say, here's the deal we got from Germany. We don't want to change. Can you match it? We've already had that discussion, Mr. K, and they've said they can't match it. He said, okay, so we stick with Lilly. They stuck with me when I needed it, and so I'm going to stick with them now. So all of the rest of the fluff doesn't mean anything until you're willing to pay the price of your honor. Now, there are many kinds of examples that I'm sure you would run into every day in the world of venture capital. How do you treat the entrepreneurs? How do you treat the limited partners? What happens when you make a mistake in the process and it's in your favor? Do you go back and correct it? If you make a mistake that's in their favor, I can damn well assure you, you go back and correct it, right? But if you make a mistake that's in your favor and they don't catch it, what's the right thing to do? Now, Mr. Kaufman would believe that he was doing a great deal for society. He would do a great deal for entrepreneurs and really a great deal for venture capitalists if he could get those kinds of values built into the day-to-day operation of the venture capital process. How people deal with each other on a basis of honor and integrity.